YouTube is by far my favourite website, and I've been using it for over a decade and a half now, ever since 2007. And yes, by the way, I do feel ancient. There's just so many great things about YouTube. Being able to create productions that people around the world can watch completely for free, having a glance at what other people have made, also for free, and of course, reading the ever so entertaining comment sections. However, despite my adoration for YouTube, I have never felt more frustrated and saddened with the site as I have done recently. But in order to explain what my problems with YouTube are, I feel like we must first go back in time in order to understand what made me fall in love with the site in the first place. So I'm gonna go in my attic and get out something that every British person has, a good old traditional TARDIS, and set the dial back all the way to 2007. See you when I get there, lads. 2020s, I will not miss you. Adios.
Money, trust, peace sometimes. And those commercial interests are very powerful interests.
Oh, 2007. I am so glad to be back. The financial crash hadn't yet happened, smartphones weren't widespread, social media wasn't a big deal, and games were actually made for players and not profits. Good times. I've said it once and I'll say it again. I think 2007 was the greatest year of all time, and nothing since has even come close. With that said, however, not everything was great about 2007. I mean, for example, camera quality. Yeah, this whole high definition thing wasn't really that widespread back then. Oh, and microphone quality? Yeah, pretty much every mic sounds like the unwanted son of a tin can / walkie-talkie. That is, those of us that actually had microphones, as most people just communicated through Notepad instead. Oh, and you see these borders surrounding the vid here? Yeah, that's called 4:3 aspect ratio. Widescreen? Pfft, never heard of it. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. Maybe. But anyway, we're here to check out YouTube, so let me just load up my trusty Windows XP machine. Oh, that brings me back. Alright. What the? Oh, piss off, annoying little bastard. Alright, so here we are on the YouTube front page, and man, does it look different. But it doesn't just look different, it is different. As you can see here, the videos recommended only have a handful of views, and yet despite this, they are featured on the YouTube front page. Not only this, but YouTube would also recommend small channels that made good stuff, even if they had just a handful of subscribers. You see, YouTube's motto back then, which has long since been retired, was broadcast yourself, and that's exactly what the website was about. I think a lot of people these days forget what the actual meaning of YouTube actually is. You, meaning you, and tube, meaning TV. You on TV. Back in the past, if you wanted to get your voice out there, you'd have to go through middlemen, namely the media, such as newspapers, radio stations, or TV networks if you were lucky. The media essentially served as a gatekeeper of information and entertainment, and the average Joe couldn't really do anything about it. And that's why YouTube was made in the first place. With the invention of this site, the middlemen were no longer needed. Now, people around the world could broadcast themselves from the comfort of their own homes and amass huge followings. YouTube gave a voice to the voiceless and empowered the masses with the ability to make their own media free from the shackles of corporate power. But it's not just that. YouTube back in the day was also a very social website. YouTube channel customization was so good, allowing you to set your own background and layout with tons of options. It really felt like it was your own little slice of the internet. But not just that, you could also leave comments on people's channels, direct video responses to someone, add people as a friend, send private messages via an inbox, and even earn little rewards for reaching certain goals. In a way, YouTube very much functioned almost like a social media website, but without all the bollocks. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There were some things that were just stupid. For example, the 5-star rating system. Yeah, back in the day you got to rate every video from 1 to 5 stars, and though this system sounds cool on paper and many are quite nostalgic for it, in reality it was a really stupid system. The reason being that humans tend to be very extreme creatures, so if someone liked a video, they would of course just rate it 5 stars, but if someone didn't like a video, they just rate it 1 star. So the middle 3 stars were effectively completely pointless because hardly anyone was enough of a connoisseur to actually use them. This resulted in pretty much every video on the platform, barring really bad videos, all having the exact same 4.5 stars. Naturally, this system wouldn't last very long, with 1 star eventually becoming the dislike button and 5 stars becoming the like button respectively. But overall, YouTube was a very communal website that was much more focused on having fun, making friends, and overall, just having a laugh. And I suppose the main reason for that was, there was no money in it. People made videos not for business, but for leisure. Now, naturally, the average video on the platform was very low quality as a result. A 240p cat video, or some guy singing in his bedroom. But hey, that's what YouTube was all about. I hate to use this word as it's often used by Redditors, but the best way I can describe YouTube back in the day was wholesome. You ever spent all day outside in the rain, only to come back home, turn the fire on, drink a hot drink, and dry out your hair? That's what YouTube felt like back then. It was wild, yes, but also so free and liberating. You could make what you want, say what you want, do what you want, and most importantly, be who you want, and no matter what, people would find you. It was, like most of the 2000s, a very special time. But of course, as we all know, that wouldn't last for long.
Pain? Saw? You died.
Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you?
And we are going to make our country great again.
Oh, and we're back. Hey, ever wondered what getting new ears feels like? Now you know. If we look at YouTube today, it's like we've entered some sort of alternate dystopian timeline. The very first thing you see on the front page is an advertisement for a TV subscription. Watch what you love with 85 plus top channels from live TV, unlimited DVR and on-demand hits. Explore Easy TV with 2 weeks of 85 plus channels and unlimited DVR. Make TV magic with 85 plus channels free, then get $10 off per month on your first 3 months. But wait a minute, what happened? I thought YouTube was meant to be replacing TV, now it's promoting it? The quality of videos has gone through the roof, with 4K cameras, great editing, amazing effects and huge multi-million-dollar budgets. But at the same time, the site feels fake. Every thumbnail has an over-the-top expression, every title an emotive statement, both designed to psychologically manipulate the viewer to watch, and most importantly, stay. A tried and tested formula. Almost all of the recommendations on the front page are from either large channels with millions of views, or corporations. Long gone are the times whereby the little guy could easily be found, now instead being buried in a sea of artificially manufactured algorithmic manipulations. And not only that, but all of the social features we spoke about earlier have been completely removed. Channel customization is now naught more than a fantasy, with every channel page now strictly adhering to the same boring, sterilised layout. There are no more channel comments, friends list, private inbox, or anything of the sort. The warmness, the feeling of being part of a community, that aspect of the site, long gone. Today, YouTube feels cold, intimidating, outnumbering, but worst of all, sterilised and corporate. Which brings us on to the real topic of this production, the removal of the dislike button. As of the time of recording, YouTube has just removed the dislike button site-wide. Well, kinda. I mean, the dislike button is still there, but as you can no longer see the like to dislike ratio, it may as well not be. So the question is then, why? I mean, no pun intended, but everyone liked the dislike button. YouTube's reasoning for removing the dislike button is to apparently protect small creators from undue critique. But as a so-called small creator myself, this logic just doesn't hold up. The majority of the time, when a creator gets a sizable number of dislikes on a video, it's because 1. Their video was inaccurate, 2. Their video was marketed to the wrong audience, or 3. The creator themselves has done something questionable. Very rarely will a video receive any sort of negative ratio unless one or multiple of those 3 scenarios are met. In the overwhelming majority of occasions, the like-to-dislike ratio serves as nothing more than an accurate representation of public opinion, and to remove such a feature in the name of protecting people is like banning sports to prevent broken legs. Technically, it would work, but it's a huge overreaction that just doesn't seem to make any sense. Do you smell that? It smells like bull. Well folks, if you've learned anything from watching my stuff in the past, you'll know that we live in a very cloak and dagger world, whereby the reasons why companies say something happens and the reason why it actually happens are often 2 completely different things. I mean, after all, the vast majority of both creators and viewers alike don't want them to remove public dislikes, and on the surface, again, it just doesn't seem to make any sense. But if you want to understand why this has happened, we're going to have to zoom out a bit and see the bigger picture. But I'm going to warn you, this is going to get political, and I'm going to go deep. But hey, that's why you're here, isn't it? I love American people. It's true. Despite the bad rep that Americans constantly get on the net, in my experience, American people tend to be some of the nicest, politest, and downright interesting folks that I have ever had the privilege of coming into contact with. And despite the endless amounts of criticism I will no doubt get from my fellow Brits and Europeans at large for saying such an absurdity, that is in fact a hill that I am willing to die on. Americans, on average, are great people. But, and there's always a but, the American government and American corporations at large tend to be, to put it bluntly, absolutely awful. And I really don't think that's a controversial statement to make. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say I think the majority of Americans watching this would probably agree with that. As we all know, the vast majority of big tech companies tend to be based in the United States, and thus the geopolitical situation of said nation is fundamentally paramount to the future of these companies. And I don't think I need to insult your intelligence by saying that the United States isn't exactly the most stable of places right now. I mean, this logic could be applied to the entirety of the Western world, to be fair, but especially so in the US. It's no secret that in America, money talks, much more so than it does anywhere else. If you're wealthy in the United States, you can live like an absolute king. However, the same logic also sadly applies in reverse, whereby if you're poor in the United States, you are pretty much treated like garbage. The reason for this is that, whereas most nations around the world were formed naturally over many hundreds of years based on a common culture, the United States was founded rather artificially via revolution based on a state ideology. That ideology being freedom. In the past, many people lived under oppressive monarchies and dictatorships. The United States was intended to be a nation that was different. A nation for the people, by the people, of the people. A nation whereby man could do whatever he so pleased, so long as he didn't interfere in the business of others. And as we can blatantly observe, this American experiment has proven to be a success. In just shy of 300 years, the United States has blossomed into the wealthiest and most powerful nation on the planet, proving, in a way, that when you give people power over their own lives, they can do great things. So, what's the problem? The problem is that though Americans are the most highly resistant people on the planet to government tyranny, with their no taxation without representation, right to bear arms, no step on snake flag, etc., etc., they are, at the same time, completely ignorant to the damage that the other type of power can do, that being corporate power. The way that a nation is meant to work is that the people are meant to tell the government what to do, and the government then tells corporations what to do. However, in the United States, this hierarchy is completely reversed, mostly as there isn't a strong enough distinction between individuals and corporations.
Corporations are people, my friend.
For example, in a normal, well-functioning nation, if a businessman tried to pay a politician to do something for them, that businessman would end up in prison just for trying, as that is called bribery. After all, it would be unethical for a politician who is meant to represent the people to take underhanded deals of any kind, as that would be a total perversion of democracy. But But in America, not only is it common for politicians to accept bribes from private individuals, but they even have another word for it: lobbying. And unlike in other nations, this practice isn't prohibited, but actually well established in the name of freedom. Essentially, what this means is that due to America's excessive fear of government, they now have no government, only corporate power.
The West, so afraid of strong government, now has no government, only financial power.
The US is a two-party state comprising of the Democrats, the supposed left-wing party, and the Republicans, the supposed right-wing adversaries. And on the surface, both of these parties look to be polar opposites from one another. The Democrats claim to represent the poor, the left behind, and the needy, whereas the Republicans claim to be the party of freedom, low taxes, and small government. However, the way these parties sell themselves to the public isn't actually how they are in reality. And the reason for this is, as mentioned earlier, lobbying.
One of the problems, not specifically on this issue, just in general, let's put it this way: money trumps peace sometimes. In other words, commercial interests are very powerful interests.
Almost all American politicians of any significance have accepted massive private corporate donations, as in order to be able to even compete in such a system, you need all the money you can get. But of course, the wealthy don't just give away donations for no reason. No, they do it for favours. And so what ends up happening in America is that politicians will promise one thing to the people, but upon getting elected, just do whatever the donors who got them into power want them to. For example, the American Democrats never stop yapping on about how America needs a proper public healthcare system and publicly funded college, and whenever election time rolls around, you bet they talk about it often. Meanwhile, whenever they actually get into power, they never actually do anything. Case in point, at the time of recording, the Democrats almost control the entire trifecta of the American federal government: the presidency, the House, and the Senate. There's nothing stopping them from making such radical reforms, and yet they choose not to. Why do you think that is? Because the Democratic Party doesn't really represent what it says it does, but only really exists to serve its ultra-wealthy donors, and of course, the last thing the ultra-wealthy American elite want is a public healthcare system or publicly funded college, mostly as they'd be the ones paying for it. Alright then, so what do the American wealthy elite actually want? Well, this shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but they obviously want to carry on consolidating their wealth and power in order to stay on top. One of the ways they do this is via free trade. In 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization, and ever since, subsequent American administrations have pursued a globalized free trade policy. What that means is that if it costs, say, $10 to make a bar of steel in the United States, but it only costs $5 to make in China, then American businesses should always pursue the cheapest possible option, regardless of origin. Prior to this, the United States used to be a manufacturing powerhouse with tens of millions of people employed in the sector. However, since the introduction of such globalized free trade policies, almost all of America's industry has been shipped overseas, mostly to China. Now, this is great for the American wealthy elite, as it has meant that they can essentially exploit overseas workers in cruel, grueling conditions and pay them cents, while raking in more profit than they ever would have domestically. But for the average American, this has led to huge levels of poverty. But under the current two-party system, those who had been burned by free trade and globalization couldn't really do anything about it, as both parties were bought and paid for by the very same businessmen spurring on such developments. That was until Trump. Now, I know Trump is a most polarizing figure, but frankly, it doesn't matter whether you like him or loathe him. That's not the point. The point is that he was not a career politician. Trump, despite being a billionaire himself, was highly patriotic and hugely disliked the slow death of American industry and the dire social consequences that went with it. Rather than being a free trader, Trump was a protectionist, meaning that he would have rather American businesses supported American industry, even if that meant that less profit overall could be made. And as we all know, Trump ran for president in 2016 and wasn't really taken that seriously. He was mocked by the media and America's elites at large, as they assumed that he would, of course, lose.
Here we are. And which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones, right now, Donald Trump.
They had significantly underestimated just how much Trump's message resonated with the average Joe. And it truly can't be overstated. This sudden realization that the American people were turning their backs on their corporate status quo scared the living daylights out of America's wealthy upper classes. They realized that they had to take action quickly before such a loss of control potentially became permanent. They analysed how exactly it was that he won. After all, almost all of the American media establishment was against him. The news, Hollywood, the music industry, and even the almighty Jeb Bush. They had used every weapon in their arsenal and yet still lost. But how? The answer, of course, was the internet. Facebook, Twitter, and our very own YouTube were primarily blamed for his victory. On these sites, people were free to listen to alternative media that was unaffiliated from the mainstream, and as such, were able to come to different conclusions.
No, you can't just use the internet to get your news. You have to watch the television.
No, I'm alright.
YouTube's profit model relies heavily on advertisers. Advertisers pay YouTube to run their ads on videos, and creators then get a slice of such advertisement revenue. Under this system, everyone wins. YouTube and their creators make money, advertisers get their ads seen, and viewers get to watch videos for free as such. However, post-2016, in order to put pressure on YouTube, large corporations started to pull out of the website, significantly damaging YouTube's revenue. This was what was known as the adpocalypse. Almost overnight, creator profits went down significantly, and YouTube was under great duress. YouTube responded to the pullout by promising to hear advertiser concerns and make significant changes as a result. And this is where things started to go south. Before, anyone could make money on the site, but now you needed to reach a minimum of 1,000 subscribers, have 3,000 hours of watch time, and only then could you even apply for the privilege. Needless to say, this was an unpopular change, but still cheered on by many in the mainstream. But that's not all. Now YouTube would also be much more strict on what videos they would allow monetization on. Political videos were pretty much a no-go, and God forbid if you swore, as that's an instant demonetization.
Poo-poo.
Hey!
Whoops.
This led to the site feeling a lot more sanitized, and some of YouTube's best productions quickly being sidelined in favor of more family-friendly goods. But by far the biggest disaster was their promotion of authoritative sources. Corporations started to brand individuals they disagreed with as borderline, misinformation, or fake news, while at the same time branding themselves as authoritative sources. Not many people know this, but YouTube actually has a blog that is creatively named the YouTube blog. Here, they talk about some of the changes they've made since 2016, in particular to the search algorithm. Let's read. How does YouTube elevate quality information for viewers? For content where accuracy is key, including news, politics, medical and scientific information, we use machine learning systems that prioritize information from authoritative sources in search results and recommendations. Over the past couple of years, we've been working to raise authoritative voices on YouTube and reduce the spread of borderline content and harmful misinformation. And we've seen great progress. Authoritative news is thriving on our site. We've launched over 30 different changes to reduce recommendations of borderline content and harmful misinformation. The result is a 70% average drop in watch time of this content coming from non-subscribed recommendations, elevating authoritative sources in our systems. In 2017, we started to prioritize authoritative voices, including news sources like CNN, Fox News, Jovan Pan, India Today, and The Guardian, for news and information queries in search results and watch next panels. Let's say you're looking to learn about a newsworthy event. For example, try searching for Brexit. Though there will still be slight variations, on average, 93% of videos in the global top 10 results come from high authority channels. And remember, this isn't my words, this is YouTube's words. They openly admit this is happening. Not that you really needed confirmation, of course, as if you've ever tried to look up anything to do with the news in the last few years, you'll have no doubt noticed this trend. For example, if you were to type in the name of a prominent politician, you'll notice all the search results don't come from actual individual YouTubers anymore, but news corporations like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, or if you're British, Sky News, The Guardian, etc. Try it out yourself if you don't believe me and see how long it takes scrolling until you find an actual YouTuber. CNN posted an article a few days ago that said, and I quote, "There's nothing more frightening in America today than an angry white man." And remember, YouTube considers that website to be an authoritative source. That's not an authoritative source, that's racism. But you see, there was just one problem. Smart people saw through this like glass. News channels such as CNN, MSNBC, and even the White House's own channel were flooded with dislikes and negative comments, breaking the illusion of respect that these establishments supposedly had. The latter, even, ended up disabling comments entirely. That's right, the government of a nation that supposedly prides itself on freedom of speech chose to prevent its own citizens from commenting on its own president's videos. Yeah. And that is what people think the real reason is that dislikes were removed, to protect big corporations from well-deserved public criticism. Now, of course, I don't believe such nonsense. Oh no, absolutely not. No, but seriously, I believe that the removal of the dislike button is a much bigger deal than people think it is. YouTube is the second most popular website in the world behind Google, which, let's face it, is owned by the same company anyway. YouTube is used by billions of people around the world. Billions with a B. The fact that the public at large can no longer show their dissent is genuinely unbelievable. An act of censorship the likes of which has never been seen in human history. Make no mistake, you might not realise it now, but this is truly a historic moment, and it will not be remembered well. YouTube is currently going through a corporate takeover. Long gone are the days of broadcasting yourself, for this is no longer YouTube, but their tube, an extension of the corporate television media that it was meant to replace. Independent political commentators have already been replaced with so-called authoritative sources. Small upstart musicians are having their screen time stolen by large music labels instead, and individual comics are also slowly being replaced with corporate so-called comedians.
And I'm guessing tough for Eric to hear. Dad! I'm sorry I didn't riot! Love me too! I'm special. Hot tip for the rioters, by the way.
YouTube had a choice between siding with corporations or the people who made this site what it is, creators, and they chose the former. And when it comes to my neck of the woods, gaming, well, I see the scores on the doors. AAA gaming is at its lowest point since the crash of the 1980s. Trust in studios is at an all-time low as microtransactions, unfinished games, and generally rude developers become status quo. I wonder, how long is it until small gaming YouTubers get replaced in the search algorithm by so-called authoritative sources, like GameSpot or IGN? If YouTube's current trajectory is anything to go by, this is inevitable. But it's not just that I worry about. If I could set the dial on my TARDIS to the year 2031, a decade in the future at the time of recording, I guarantee, by that point, YouTube will no longer have a comment section. And some of you will think I'm insane for saying that, as if people wouldn't put up with it, but be real with me, if I would have said 5 years ago that they would remove dislikes, you would have laughed at me then as well. The fact is that right now, YouTube is a monopoly, and because the American government is a useless construct, they refuse to do anything about it, which puts us all at the merciful whim of a handful of Silicon Valley businessmen. Regardless, the modus operandi of this new corporate YouTube seems clear: to take power away from individual creators and viewers and shift it onto their corporate overlords. But the only way to do that is to prevent any form of rebellion. Dislikes, competition, and of course, comments. 2 of those 3 things are already gone, and it's only a matter of time before they complete the trifecta. However, I don't want to leave you feeling saddened. Truth is, I'm actually feeling quite optimistic about the future. With every day that passes, more and more people are all coming to the exact same conclusion, that it's becoming clear that the real enemy isn't someone on the left who wants strong public services for the masses, or someone on the right who wants a stable place to live, but the man turning us against one another. People are starting to notice the blatant propaganda littered everywhere in films, games, and the media at large. And it's only a matter of time before people shed themselves of the mental shackles imposed on them by such corporates, once and for all. For now, however, the next few years are going to be rough. As more and more people slowly come to this realization, more control will be enforced, creating a symbiotic loop of action. We can only pray that in the meantime, a better website emerges, one that holds true the values that this one used to have. And I think that's inevitable. Either that or, of course, the much more preferable option that YouTube is either regulated or naturally goes back to the way it was before. But I increasingly find that ever so unlikely. Which is why it's ever more important to be sure to support small creators that you like, for they need all the help they can get. Whatever the case, I am certain that as always, whether it's government tyranny, corporate tyranny, or as today, a mix of the two, in the end, it's you the people who shall prevail. Yeah, honestly folks, it's so sad what's happening to this website. It just feels like every year it gets worse and worse. I wish Elon Musk could have bought YouTube instead of Twitter. That would have been so much better. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it brought you some joy at least. You know, I would ask usually for your thoughts on the matter, but I've never met anyone who says, you know, I think YouTube's getting better actually. No, pretty much everyone thinks it's getting worse. Hey, if you do think YouTube's getting better, well, I want to hear why. I'd love to know. Give me some optimism, please. But anyway, shout out to the Wall of Famers as ever. Shories, Sories, Exuries. Look, you're gonna have to tell me how you pronounce this name, okay? I'm never gonna get it right. Shories, right? That's how you pronounce it. I'm sure it is. Ardent Word, absolutely fantastic gentleman. My 2 pence, another fantastic gentleman. Scrophilus Rex, Andrew Hamrick, Wes FR, Philippe M, Bob Page. Bob, I have to say, your name seems familiar to me. Have I seen you around somewhere? I'm pretty sure I have. Denton Cassels, good sir, good to see you. And BW Gaming, of course. Oh when will this website get better? I hope it does, I really, really do. But until then, I'll see you next time.